The wind howled across the mountains like a beast in pain. Snow fell in heavy silence, swallowing every sound, every footprint, every trace of life. But through the storm, a faint cry broke, sharp, human, and desperate. Nareth Vire lifted his head from the shadows of an old pine tree. His black cloak was dusted white with frost, his eyes burning faintly red in the night. He had not heard a human voice in months, not this deep in the forsaken woods where no mortal dared to walk. Yet that cry, it wasn't just human, it carried fear and something else. He began to move. The snow did not crunch beneath his boots. It parted for him, as if even the cold respected his presence. He followed the sound until it came again, a scream, then silence, then the wild snarling of wolves. By the time he reached the clearing, the moon had broken through the clouds. A pack of black wolves circled a small figure huddled in the snow. Her cloak was torn, her hands trembling as she clutched her swollen belly. The beasts crept closer, their yellow eyes gleaming with hunger. Nareth didn't think. He moved faster than the wind. One wolf lunged, and in the same heartbeat, its body hit the ground, throat torn, blood steaming on the snow. The others turned, growling, uncertain. Nareth's eyes glowed brighter now, two burning coals in the dark. "Leave," he said quietly. The wolves whimpered, their tails dropping, and scattered into the forest, leaving the air heavy and still. When the silence returned, Nareth turned to the woman. She was on her knees, breathing fast, her lips pale, her face wet with tears. Her clothes were thin, soaked through by melting snow. "Don't come closer," she whispered, her voice shaking. Nareth stopped a few steps away. "You're hurt," he said, his tone calm but distant. Her eyes flicked up to his face and froze there. "You're not human," she breathed. "No," he answered, "but neither are they." He looked toward the trees, where the wolves had vanished. "They won't return tonight." Her body relaxed only slightly, but her fear lingered. She pressed her hand against her stomach, her breath catching. "Please, my child, it's coming too soon." Nareth's eyes narrowed. He could sense it. The strange rhythm of two heartbeats, one weak, one unnatural. Something about it made his blood stir uneasily. He knelt beside her despite her trembling. "You'll die if you stay here," he said quietly. "There's a cabin not far from here. Come," she hesitated. "I don't even know your name." "Nareth," he said simply. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm Maera." He nodded once, then lifted her gently into his arms. Her body was light, fragile, her warmth faint beneath the cold. She tried not to look at his face, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. They moved through the snow, the forest groaning under the wind. The moonlight followed them like a ghost. When they reached the cabin, an old hunter's shelter buried beneath frost, Nareth pushed open the wooden door. The inside was dark, but dry. He set her near the fire pit and struck a spark with his clawed hand. Flames flickered to life, painting the walls in orange light. Maera watched him quietly, her eyes wide. "You saved me," she whispered. Nareth didn't answer. He turned toward the door, listening. The forest outside was still, but in that stillness he felt something wrong, something watching. Maera's voice pulled him back. "You should have left me," she said softly. "Men who help me, they don't live long." Nareth looked at her sharply. "Why?" She hesitated, pressing her hand harder against her belly. "Because whatever lives inside me, it isn't human." The fire crackled, and the shadows seemed to move closer. Nareth's eyes narrowed. He could hear it again, that second heartbeat, deeper now, echoing through her body. And for the first time in many years, the alpha vampire felt something he thought he'd forgotten: fear. The fire burned low, its light trembling across the old cabin walls. Maera sat near it, shivering though the flames licked close. Her eyes were half closed, her breath uneven. Nareth stood by the window, silent as a shadow. He hadn't moved in a long while, but his mind raced. The second heartbeat still echoed in his senses. Faint but wrong. Too steady, too cold, not human, not even mortal. He'd heard such heartbeats before. Once, long ago, when the world was younger and darker things walked among men. "Drink this," he said finally. He handed her a small cup of warm water from the melting snow. Her hands trembled as she took it. "Thank you." Nareth nodded once. He didn't need thanks. He wanted answers. "How long have you carried the child?" he asked. 7 months, she whispered. "At least, that's what the healer said before she vanished." "Vanished?" Maera nodded weakly. "Everyone who's tried to help me disappears. My husband, too. He was a kind man. He wanted to believe this child was a blessing. But after the storms came, after the animals started dying..." She looked into the fire. "He went into the woods and never came back." Nareth's gaze sharpened. "You searched for him?" She shook her head. "I was too afraid." "The forest changes at night. It's like it listens." Nareth turned back to the window. He didn't answer, but he understood. The woods were cursed ground, the kind that drew lost souls like a wound draws flies. Behind him, Maera's breathing slowed. Exhaustion took her, and her eyes fluttered closed. Nareth watched her for a moment. Then he stepped outside. The air was sharp with frost. The snow had stopped falling, but the forest was restless. He could hear the rustle of movement. Not wolves this time, something larger. He walked a few paces away from the cabin, his cloak trailing across the snow. The moon glowed behind thin clouds, and in its pale light, the trees cast long, broken shadows. Then he heard it, a whisper. It came from nowhere and everywhere, a voice that wasn't human, soft as a sigh and cold as the grave. "She carries my blood," it said. Nareth's eyes glowed crimson. "Show yourself." The wind rose, the trees creaked, and from between them stepped a shape cloaked in darkness. Its form shifted like smoke, its face hidden beneath a hood. "You shouldn't have touched her," the voice said, low and echoing. "She was marked." Nareth took a step forward. "By what?" The shadow tilted its head. "By me." Before Nareth could move, the shape scattered like ash on the wind. Only silence remained, heavy and cruel. When he returned inside, Maera was awake, her hand gripping her stomach in pain. "It hurts," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Nareth knelt beside her. He could feel the power rising from within her body, cold, pulsing, alive in a way that made his skin crawl. Her eyes filled with tears. "What's happening to me?" He hesitated. "You said you don't know what the child is." She nodded. "The night I conceived, there was no one with me. I woke in the fields, covered in frost. I thought I had died, but I was alive, and the child was already growing." Nareth looked at her, his face unreadable. "You were chosen." "For what?" He stared into the flames. "Something ancient. Something that should have stayed buried." Maera sobbed softly. "If it's evil, kill me. Please. I don't want to bring it into this world." Nareth's jaw tightened. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be gone already." "Then why save me?" she asked through her tears. He didn't answer at first. The question struck deeper than she knew. Finally he said, "Because I've seen enough death to know not everything born in darkness must be destroyed." The words hung in the air like smoke. Maera's eyes softened, but her fear didn't fade. Outside, the wind moaned again, but this time it wasn't just the forest. There were footsteps, slow, heavy, too many to count. Nareth rose to his feet. "Stay here." Maera tried to speak, but her voice broke. "What is it?" "Not wolves," he said quietly. He stepped outside, the cold biting his skin. From the shadows between the trees, dozens of eyes glimmered, not animal, not human. Figures moved, shrouded in mist, crawling closer to the cabin, and then he heard it again. The whisper of that unseen voice, now deeper, angrier. She's mine. Nareth's fangs bared, his crimson eyes burning. Not tonight. He spread his arms, and the storm answered him. The wind howled, the snow rose like a living wave, and the alpha vampire went to war with the dark. Snow spiraled around Nareth like white fire, the wind twisting under his will. His cloak whipped behind him as he stepped into the open clearing where the shadows gathered in silence. The figures stopped moving when he appeared, dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed, their skin like cracked ice. Some crawled on all fours, others stood tall, faces hidden under torn hoods, soulless, not living, not dead. Nareth had seen them before. The hollowed, spirits bound to serve whatever dark force claimed their blood. Turn back, he warned, voice low but carrying across the snow. No answer came, only the sound of slow, uneven breathing. Then one of them stepped forward, its jaw hanging loose, its eyes black as tar. The mother belongs to us. Nareth's eyes burned red. You'll have to take her from me. The first creature lunged, and the fight began. Nareth moved like a shadow, faster than thought. He caught the creature by the throat, lifted it from the ground, and crushed its neck with one hand. It dissolved into ash before it hit the snow. More followed. Clawed hands, broken faces, whispering voices. They surrounded him, but he didn't fall back. His strength was ancient, born of blood and fury. He tore through them like the storm itself, but each time one fell, another rose. Their black blood hissed against the snow. Inside the cabin, Maera covered her ears. The sound outside was unreal, like thunder and screaming woven together. The flames flickered violently, and something cold moved across the floor. Crawling toward her feet, she gasped and backed away, but the shadows clung to her dress. Then she heard it. The second heartbeat again, pounding inside her belly like a drum. It grew louder, stronger. "Stop," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please stop." But the heartbeat didn't stop. It began to echo through the walls. The flames in the fireplace dimmed, and for a moment, the cabin grew completely dark. Outside, Nareth struck down the last of the hollowed. Their bodies turned to mist and vanished into the wind. He stood still, chest heaving, though he didn't need breath. Then he felt it. A pulse of power, faint but spreading from the cabin behind him. He turned quickly and rushed inside. Maera was on the floor, trembling, her hands pressed over her stomach. The air around her shimmered, and black veins crawled across her skin. "Maera!" Nareth dropped to his knees beside her. She looked up, eyes wide and glowing faintly gold. "It's not me," she whispered. "It's him. He's waking." Nareth touched her shoulder and was thrown back as if struck by lightning. He hit the wall hard, splinters flying. The air in the cabin thickened, trembling with unseen force. The fire went out. Only Maera's faint glow remained, and within it, the shadow of something moving beneath her skin. Nareth stood, his face dark with realization. "It's feeding," he said under his breath. "On you." Maera sobbed, shaking her head. "Make it stop." "Please." Nareth reached for her again, his fangs clenched, his power rising, but before he could touch her, the wind inside the room froze, and a voice, deep, ancient, almost human, whispered from nowhere, "You should not have saved her." Nareth's eyes darted toward the corner of the room where darkness gathered like smoke. A shape emerged, tall, faceless, its body bending like it wasn't made of flesh. It smiled, though it had no mouth. "She was my vessel." Nareth's voice turned to steel. "Then you made a mistake." The shadow laughed softly, Do you think you can protect her, vampire? You, who was cursed to destroy everything you love? The words cut deep. For the first time in centuries, Nareth's anger faltered, replaced by something raw, buried, and painful. The shadow leaned closer. You don't remember, do you? You once swore to me. You drank my blood beneath the red moon. You belong to the same darkness that grows inside her. Nareth's eyes widened. Lies. Truth, the voice hissed. You saved her because you felt it. The bond. She carries your mark. Nareth froze. He looked at Maera, her faint light, her trembling form, and saw it for the first time. A thin scar on her neck, a mark he hadn't noticed, one he knew well. The same mark that appeared on those bound to him by blood. No, he whispered. Maera's voice broke the silence. What does it mean? Nareth looked at her, guilt clouding his face. It means... He paused, almost unable to speak. You were never supposed to live. The shadow began to fade, its voice echoing as it disappeared into the cold. Then she will die when the child is born. The wind fell silent again. Maera cried softly, clutching her belly, her tears falling onto the cold floor. Tell me it's not true, she begged. Nareth knelt beside her, his hand hovering close, but afraid to touch. I don't know yet, he said quietly, but I'll find out. His eyes, once calm, now burned with something fierce. A vow, because deep down, he knew the shadow wasn't lying, and whatever that child was, it had his blood. The storm was gone by morning. The forest lay silent under a pale sky, but the air still felt heavy, as if it remembered every scream. Inside the cabin, Maera slept fitfully beside the cold fire. Nareth stood near the door, unmoving. He hadn't closed his eyes all night. His thoughts kept circling the same truth. The mark on Maera's neck was his. Somehow his own curse had touched her life before they ever met. He needed answers. He stepped outside and walked until the trees thinned and the frozen stream appeared. He knelt, brushed away the ice, and let a few drops of his blood fall into the water. The surface darkened, swirling until it showed a faint reflection of another place, a ruined hall of stone lit by torches that burned blue. Elder Varen, Nareth said. The image shifted. A figure in tattered robes looked back at him, its face pale and dry as old parchment. You have not called me in centuries, child of night. The voice rasped. What wakes you now? A woman, Nareth said. She carries a child marked by my blood, though I have never touched her. The elder's eyes flickered. Impossible. She bears my seal. Silence. Then a slow hiss. If your mark appeared on her, then your curse has begun to root again. The one inside her is no child. It is a binding. The shadow you saw seeks rebirth. Nareth's hands clenched. Tell me how to stop it. You can't, the elder said, not without breaking your own bond. To save her, you must cut the line that ties your blood to the darkness. It will end her pain, and it will end you. The image faded. Only the water's reflection remained, his face pale and still, with eyes that no longer looked certain. When he returned, Maera was awake. She sat by the fire, staring at the window where the light crept in. You were gone, she said softly. I had to speak with someone. Someone like you? He nodded. Her voice shook. Tell me what's happening to me. I can feel him moving now. It's not like a child. It's cold. Nareth crouched beside her. There's a darkness inside you that isn't yours. It came from something older than both of us. Her eyes filled with tears. Will it kill me? He hesitated, then said, Not if I stop it. How? He looked away. By ending what I am? She reached for his hand, surprising him. You saved me. Don't throw yourself away for me. Nareth met her gaze. You don't understand. If I don't, that thing will use you to come into this world, and once it does, it won't stop at one life." Maera's hand tightened around his. "Then teach me how to help." He almost smiled, a small flicker in his tired face. "You're braver than you should be." "I'm just scared," she said, "and I don't want to die without trying." For the first time in centuries, Nareth felt something stir inside his chest, a warmth he thought had died long ago. He didn't know if it was hope or the beginning of the end. He stood and began packing what little they had. "We have to reach the ruins in the Eastern Valley," he said. "There's a circle of stone where the first oath was made. If we reach it before the next full moon, we might still have time." Maera nodded weakly. "Then let's go." They left before dusk. The forest was quieter than before, as if holding its breath. Snow crunched under their boots, the sky bleeding orange behind the mountains. Maera leaned on Nareth's arm when the path grew steep, and though his body was cold as marble, his presence steadied her. By nightfall, they reached a ridge overlooking a frozen lake. They stopped there to rest. Maera sat near the rocks, her hands on her stomach, watching the moon rise. "He's awake again," she whispered. Nareth looked at her, the faint glow from the moon outlining her face. "Try to breathe through it." She nodded, but the pain grew. The heartbeat inside her quickened, too fast, too loud. Nareth heard it too. It matched his own pulse for one brief, terrible moment. He knelt beside her. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, don't let the voice in your head answer you." "What voice?" "The one that calls your name." Maera's lips parted. "You mean the whisper that tells me he's almost here?" Before he could reply, the wind shifted, and the snow rippled like water. A dark shape rose from the surface of the frozen lake, tall, thin, with arms that reached too far. Its eyes glowed like dying embers. Nareth pushed Maera behind him. "Stay down." The figure stepped onto the shore, the ice cracking beneath its feet. "You cannot outrun a promise, Nareth Vyre," it said. "The blood you gave me once must return." Nareth's fangs showed. "Then take it from me, not her." The creature tilted its head. "I intend to." It moved faster than wind. Nareth met it halfway, claws clashing against shadow. Sparks burst through the dark, the air thick with the smell of burnt frost. Behind them, Maera screamed as the ground shook. The heartbeat in her belly thundered like a drum. And from within her, something answered the creature's voice. The lake cracked open with a deafening roar. Shards of ice lifted like broken glass as the creature struck Nareth with a force that sent him crashing into the snow. He rolled, rose again, and lunged before it could reach Maera. Every blow echoed through the valley. The moonlight burned silver on Nareth's skin as his claws tore through mist and shadow. But the creature only reformed, darker and stronger each time. Maera clutched her stomach, trembling. The whisper in her head grew louder, soft at first, then pleading. "Let me out, Maera." "You don't need him. You only need me." Her hands covered her ears. "Stop!" Nareth turned at her voice and saw something horrifying, her eyes glowing faintly red. "Maera," he shouted, "fight it!" But the creature laughed, a sound that felt like wind scraping over stone. "She cannot fight what's in her." "The child is mine." Nareth's body tensed. He drew the dagger he'd carried since the beginning, the one carved from the bone of the first vampire. Its edge shimmered faintly with his own blood. "If it's your child you want," Nareth said, "you'll have to take it from my hands." The shadow lunged. Nareth met it with the dagger, plunging it deep into the creature's chest. The scream that followed split the air, shaking the trees and cracking the frozen lake even wider. Maera collapsed. The glow from her eyes faded, but her breathing slowed too. Nareth fell beside her. "Stay with me." She looked at him weakly. "It hurts. Inside. I know. His voice trembled. It's trying to bind itself to your soul. Her fingers gripped his sleeve, then cut it out. He froze. If I do that, I might lose you. Her tears rolled silently. You'll lose me anyway. Nareth looked down at her, this fragile human who had shown more courage than any immortal he had ever known. He placed his palm over her heart. Forgive me. Then he closed his eyes and let the old words rise from memory, words forbidden to speak, carved in his mind, since the night he first became what he was. The mark on Maera's neck glowed, the air thickened, the ground beneath them turned red like blood beneath the ice. Her scream tore through the night. Light burst from her chest, and Nareth's body shuddered as the same light poured from his eyes and mouth. For a heartbeat, they shared the same pain. Then silence. When Nareth opened his eyes, he was on his knees in the snow. The lake had gone still again. Maera lay motionless beside him, her skin pale but peaceful. Her hand rested on her stomach. The mark was gone. He leaned closer, her pulse faint, but there. She was alive, but the presence inside her was gone too. No sound, no heartbeat. Nareth let out a long, trembling breath. The dagger, now blackened, slipped from his fingers. Rest, he whispered. It's over. Yet deep inside, he knew it wasn't. The ritual had not destroyed the shadow. It had only moved it. Somewhere, in the echo of his own blood, he still felt it breathing. Hours passed before Maera stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the light. You're still here, she said faintly. I said I would be. She looked around, the broken ice, the quiet trees, the sky turning gray with dawn. It's gone, isn't it? For now, Nareth said. Her hand went to her belly, now silent. A tear fell from her cheek. I can't even feel him anymore. Nareth looked away. He was never meant to be. She nodded, whispering, Then what happens to us now? He hesitated. There's something you must know. What? The bond that tied the shadow to you was mine. When I broke it, part of me went with it. I don't have long. Maera's eyes widened. No, there has to be a way. He smiled faintly. There never is. Not for people like me. She took his hand, pressing it to her heart. Then let me save you for once. He shook his head. You already did? The light from the rising sun crept over the horizon. Nareth's skin began to fade in its warmth, turning translucent. Nareth, she cried. He touched her face gently, leaving faint trails of frost where his fingers brushed her skin. Live, Maera. That's all I ever wanted. And as the first full light of day touched him, he vanished, leaving nothing behind but the silver dagger, half buried in the snow. Maera sat there for hours, the wind whispering through the valley. When she finally rose, she took the dagger and held it to her chest. The mark didn't return, but for a brief moment she felt something, like a heartbeat, faint and distant, not her own. She whispered into the cold air, I'll keep you alive in my stories. And somewhere deep beneath the frozen lake, something stirred again, quietly, as if waiting for its next name to be called. The valley stayed silent for days after he disappeared. Maera barely spoke. She slept beside the silver dagger as if it could still keep her warm. Each morning, frost traced the edge of the window, even though spring had begun. Sometimes she would whisper his name into the wind, and the air would stir, as if listening. She tried to convince herself that the heartbeat she felt was only her imagination. One night, while tending a small fire, she heard it again. A single pulse that echoed faintly through the floorboards. Then a voice, soft and distant. You're safe now. Her breath caught. Nareth? No one answered, but the flame in the hearth flickered once. Like a nod, she smiled through her tears. If you're still here, stay as long as you can. Days turned to weeks. Maera moved to a small cottage on the hill where the river curved like silver under the moon. She planted seeds, mended clothes, and tried to live the way he told her. Quietly, honestly, with courage. Sometimes when the wind crossed the trees, she felt a calmness spread through her chest. It was the same calm she had felt when Nareth stood near. She began to believe that part of him truly lingered, not as a curse, but as protection. One evening she sat by the river with the dagger beside her. The water mirrored the stars, and her reflection seemed older, stronger. She whispered, "You kept your promise. You saved me." The breeze stirred, carrying faint words that brushed her ear. "And you saved me too." Maera closed her eyes. For a moment she could almost see him beside her, the tall figure in dark armor, watching the same stars in silence. When she reached out, the air turned cold against her fingers, and then warm again, as if he had touched her hand. She smiled faintly. "I'll be all right now," she said. "You can rest." The wind settled. The night felt lighter, softer, and though the frost still formed on her window some mornings, it never frightened her again. It only reminded her that love, even cursed and broken, can find a way to stay. Spring deepened. Grass grew over the snowfields, and wildflowers crept across the stones near the river. Maera's cottage looked alive again, herbs drying from the rafters, smoke curling softly from the chimney. She had learned to live with the quiet. Some evenings she even sang, her voice small but steady. The villagers had stopped avoiding her. They came for herbs, for advice, for the strange comfort she carried now. No one knew the truth. That part of her heart no longer belonged fully to this world. Sometimes, when she touched a sick child's forehead, the fever would ease. When she whispered a prayer for a wounded animal, the bleeding would slow. She never called it magic. She only said, "It's kindness returning." But she knew whose kindness it really was. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and turned the valley gold, a traveler rode to her door. He wore a long gray cloak and carried no weapon, only a staff carved with faint runes. He greeted her with a gentle nod. "You must be Maera Loon." She studied him warily. "Who asks?" "An old friend of Nareth." Her breath caught. "He's gone." The man smiled faintly. "Not entirely. I came to see the one who carries his peace." He removed a small pendant from his neck, a black stone shaped like a teardrop. It shimmered faintly, as if light moved inside it. "This was his," the stranger said. "He asked that, if his name ever fades from the world, someone should return this to the one who made him remember it." Maera reached out, her hands trembling. When she touched the stone, warmth spread through her chest. Slow and calm, she whispered, "I thought he was gone." The stranger shook his head. "The light inside this stone is all that remains of him. He chose peace over power, which means part of him lives in peace, and part with you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then he's free?" "Yes," the man said softly. "He's where the sun never burns, and the night never hungers." He left before dusk. Maera stood at the door long after he'd gone, the pendant glimmering in her palm. For the first time since that winter night, she didn't feel empty. Months passed. The valley prospered again, fields heavy with grain, children laughing through the meadows. People often came to Maera for healing, saying her house felt blessed. She always smiled and offered tea, never speaking of the frozen lake or the man who had saved her. Some nights she sat by the fire and turned the pendant in her hand. The stone's faint light pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. She would close her eyes and whisper, "Thank you." And sometimes the flame in the hearth would flicker once, gently, in reply. One clear night, she fell asleep by the window. In her dreams, she walked through a field of snow that didn't feel cold. Ahead stood a figure in the mist, tall, quiet, familiar. "Nareth," she whispered. He turned, his face calm and human now, the sharpness gone from his eyes. "You kept your promise," he said. "You lived." "I tried," she murmured. "Was it enough?" "It was everything." He reached out, and though she could not feel his touch, the air glowed faintly where their hands met. "You carry light now," he said. "That was the end I always wanted." When she woke, dawn was breaking. The pendant on her table shone brighter than before. She opened the window. The frost was gone. Only dew sparkled on the grass. Years later, villagers would speak of her as the woman who healed the valley. No one remembered the wolves, or the storm, or the frozen lake. But every winter's end, a soft mist would roll down from the hills, and in that mist, some claimed to see a figure watching quietly over the river, tall, cloaked, motionless as the trees. Maera never denied the stories. She would only smile and say, "Some promises keep themselves." And when she finally grew old, the pendant still rested by her bed, pulsing faintly with the light of two hearts, one mortal, one eternal, beating together in peace. The years turned gently. Seasons came and went across the valley like soft breaths. Maera's hair silvered, her hands grew slower, but her eyes still held the calm blue that everyone in the village trusted. The pendant remained where she kept it, beside her window where morning light could touch it first. Each dawn, it caught the sun and sent a single beam of light across the room, falling over her chair by the fire. It was her quiet reminder. Some warmth never fades. Children often visited her, bringing wildflowers and stories. She listened, laughed, and taught them simple truths. How to read the wind, how to speak kindly, how to thank the world for what it gives. They called her Mother Maera, though she never had children of her own. Sometimes she would pause, looking toward the hills where the river bent, and her smile would linger, soft, knowing. She never told anyone what she saw, but the villagers said she spoke once each morning to someone unseen. One late winter evening, a traveler arrived. He looked weary from a long journey, his cloak torn by wind, his boots heavy with frost. He knocked gently at Maera's door. She opened it, leaning on her cane. "You've come far," she said. The man bowed slightly. "I've been looking for the Valley of the Frost Healer." Maera smiled faintly. "You found it. Come in before the cold steals your strength." He entered and warmed his hands by the fire. The scent of herbs filled the air. "I heard stories," he said quietly, "about a woman who was once saved by a creature not of this world. They say she carries his light." Maera's eyes softened. "Stories grow on their own, like vines. What you hear may not be what happened." The man nodded. "Still, they give hope." "My sister is sick. The doctors say she won't see spring. But I thought, if even half the tale is true, perhaps you could help." Maera took a slow breath. Hope doesn't come from power. It comes from faith and from love. "Sit with me." They sat together until the fire burned low. She placed her hand over his and closed her eyes. For a moment, the pendant on the table shimmered faintly. The air grew still and warm. When she opened her eyes, the man's weary face looked different. Calmer, lighter. He whispered, "What did you do?" She smiled. "I just asked the light to listen." The next morning, the traveler prepared to leave. Snow had fallen softly overnight, covering the path in silver. Maera handed him the pendant. "Take this," she said. "It belongs to those who still believe." He shook his head. "It's too precious." "It isn't mine," she replied gently. "It was never meant to stay here." The man hesitated, and then accepted it. The stone pulsed once, faintly warm in his hand. As he rode away, Maera watched from the doorway until he vanished into the white. She whispered, "Go with peace, my old friend. Find your way through someone new." When she turned back inside, she felt the air shift, soft, almost like a sigh. The frost on the window formed two faint handprints, side by side. She smiled. "You're still watching." That night, the stars shone brighter than any night before. Maera sat in her chair by the fire, her eyes half closed. The warmth surrounded her like an embrace. Her last thought before sleep came was of the river, frozen under moonlight, and a tall figure standing there, waiting with open arms. She whispered one final time, "I'm not afraid." When the fire faded, the cottage fell silent. The morning sun touched her face gently, and she looked peaceful, almost as if smiling in her dreams. The villagers found her the next day, seated by the window with frost-shaped like wings behind her chair. They buried her beside the river she loved, beneath a willow tree that bloomed early every spring. Many years later, a child playing by that same river found a pendant half buried in the soil. It was smooth, dark, and faintly warm, even in the cold. When she lifted it, it shimmered softly, just once, like a heart waking from sleep. Her mother called her name, Loon, and the child smiled, tucking the pendant close to her chest. Far away, where the night sky touched the mountains, a faint breeze stirred the mist. Two figures walked together, one cloaked in light, the other in shadow. Their hands met for an instant, and the world between them glowed faintly silver. Then they vanished into the horizon, where dawn and dusk meet, together at last. The wind sang softly through the valley that once held Maera's cottage. The willow tree bent gracefully over her resting place, its leaves silvered by moonlight. The villagers still left flowers there each spring, whispering quiet prayers to the woman who once spoke with light. Years turned into centuries, but the stories never faded. They became songs told by fireside and echoed by travelers. They said a healer once loved a creature born of darkness, and that love taught even the night to dream of dawn. One winter morning, the girl named Loon, the same child who found the pendant, grew into a young woman. She was unlike others in the village. Her touch could calm the frightened, her words could mend hearts, and her dreams were never just dreams. Each night, she dreamed of a man standing by a frozen river, tall, calm, with eyes like ancient storms. He never spoke. He only looked at her with a kind of sorrow that felt like love, waiting to be remembered. Loon would wake with tears on her cheeks, holding the pendant that never cooled, no matter the season. Her mother would ask, "Do you still dream of him?" And Loon would nod, "Yes, but I think he's not asking me to find him. He's asking me to remember." One twilight, when snow fell quietly upon the valley, Loon walked to the willow tree. The air shimmered faintly as she approached. She knelt beside Maera's grave, the pendant warm against her skin. "Who were you?" she whispered. "And why does my heart feel like it's lived before?" A faint wind stirred. It carried a single voice, not loud, but deep as memory, because love never dies. "It only waits," Loon gasped, her eyes wide. The pendant glowed softly in her palm. The frost around her shimmered, forming the faint outline of two figures, one woman, one man, standing hand in hand beneath the willow's branches. They looked at her, smiling with eternal calm. Maera's voice, gentle as snow, whispered, "Live well, child, for every love reborn brings light to another age." Then the figures faded, leaving only warmth and silence. Loon stood there, long after the glow had vanished. When she finally turned toward home, the morning light broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the valley. She held the pendant close, smiling through her tears. From that day on, the valley changed. Flowers bloomed earlier. The river stayed clear, even through winter, and people said they sometimes saw two shapes, just faint shadows, walking by the river at dusk, their hands always intertwined. No one feared them. They were guardians of the light, protectors of those who dared to love beyond time. And so, the tale of Maera and Nareth became more than memory. It became the breath of the land itself. Every dawn that touched the valley carried their promise. Every heart that dared to love, even when the world grew cold, was part of that promise. Because love that begins in darkness always finds its way back to the light.